So we were talking about the idea of Mayan Ganim versus Be'er Mayim Chaim. And we were talking about that there's the Mayan Ganim, there's the way the neshama is in Gan Eden, that's a Mayan, that's a wellspring, and then there's the level of the Be'er down here, the level, the way the neshama is down here is the way of a Be'er, that you need to do work to reveal it. And that's essentially what we're going to talk about now in Ois Hey, after speaking about that a Mayon is something that is created by Hashem, and therefore that's something that comes from above. It's not about our work, versus a Be'er is something about our work which happens when the neshama descends into this world. So again, we'll begin from the beginning of Ois Hey, even though we learned a few lines into it, on page 8. Omnam la'achre yirid ha'neshama lamata, after the descent of the neshama down here below, tzrich aliyas ha'avoida lamata, there needs to be the service and the work down here below, ma'aseinu or desenu, our actions and our service, b'losh la'kasav chafaruha v'charuha, that we need to dig, we need to uncover the water that's in the well, in such a way, that through the uncovering of the water, there will be the aliyah, the elevation of the water, until such a level of an ascent, that for the sake of this descent was, for the sake of this ascent, was worth the entire descent. Like the classic term, it's a descent for the sake of an ascent. Means even though even prior to the descent, the neshama was already in the state where it was a wellspring that irrigated the gardens, meaning even it already was mashpia in Gan Eden because it came from a level that's higher than Gan Eden, like we said. It's descent to pass through this low world, that there's nothing lower than it, is leifel sham dir leis baruch tachtoinim, to effect down here, over there in this low world, a home for the Eibishter down here below. It's similar to a well. Shamayim yordim derech sulama de pros, that the waters descend through what he calls the ladders of pros. That he says that there is. It's such a mayon, it's such a wellspring we learned about yesterday. That's even higher than the river of Pros, but really it all emanates from Pros. This is the point where we left off yesterday. The Nahar Pros, we said, is higher than all the three rivers. That's the other three rivers. And the three rivers are higher than all the rivers of the world. But then there is the spring that's on top of the mountain, higher than the Nahar Pros, that comes out, that the Nahar Pros goes under the mountain, and now it goes up till it reaches the wellspring on top of the mountain. So it comes out that Pros, by going underground, is getting an aliyah to go up to the top of the mountain. Through this becomes an elevation, even in comparison to Nahar Pros, because now it is actually higher. The spring is in its location. Now when it comes out from the top of the mountain, it's even higher than the river Pros. This is also a halachic advantage as well. Nahar Pros, Yochel Lias, Maimed Matzav, there is a halacha in Hilchas Mikvos that not all rivers are kosher for a mikveh, because if what dripped into it, noitfim, which means the rainwater, are more than the running water that's from the river itself, then it's not a kosher mikveh. She'oz yesh b'mayim kama hagbolos. So then the waters have different types of limitations until you actually have to bracket it off and seal it off within one location, and then you could use the then you could use the rainwater if it is closed off. But if it's running and it's rainwater, then it's not good. So you need so there's different halachas that happen. Essentially, what he's trying to say that when it's in the state of a river, it's not as good as the state of the spring. And this river doesn't have the din of a spring that we know that a spring can be mitayr b'kolshu as we and it could be moving, etc. It doesn't have the din of being living waters. That living waters is what's used later. We'll talk about it's used for certain things that even a mayim isn't used for. When waters go through the ladder of pros, and they go through the veins, the underground channels and veins. And there's the idea of the digging up, like it says in the pasuk. To remove the earth and other things that are covering and hiding over the well. So then the well becomes in the way of a well of living water. It's even higher than the level of a spring. And the spring is also higher than the river. So then it's the highest of the high. Top of page Gimel. Though a spring can purify many levels of tumah, but it does not purify the three most severe types of tumahs. The zav, whether it's someone that has certain types of emissions, mitzoira, someone that has a din of toira type of leprosy, utmei meis, and someone that is came in contact with a corpse. And then you need to have mayim chayim, that's living spring water. It has to be mixed with the ashes of the paraduma, the red heifer. Shebeshvil zeh tzarich mayim chayim dafke. For this, you need to have specifically living spring water. Kimavor b'mishnah mikvos, like the mishnayos and mikvos over there, it's explained proti adargis, the specific levels. The mayon of a wellspring, shemeim of mu'atim, if there's very little water on the wellspring, mayim mukim, if it's a type of water that is mukin. Mukin means that either salty or it's a water that's warm water instead of cool water. And then ba'ad l'mayim chaim, until the ultimate type of level of water, which is the living spring water, which is not salty, not warm, and these are the only types of water that is able to be used for the ultimate level of tahara that's necessary. The main thing is, without going into all the halachas of mikvahs, is that by going underground, it reaches the ultimate level, the highest level, the level of mayim chayim. So the same thing is in the mashal, line 6, with the gmas ben nimshal, and similarity is in the metaphor. When the neshama is such a state of the wellspring of gardens. In other words, the level, the way it's feeding and irrigating Gan Eden, though a wellspring is something that's created by the hands of heaven as opposed to a well, like we explained beforehand. So then it's in such a way that the wellspring, the way it is in its place, comes down from its place into the gardens, meaning that it's a pretty high level. It's in such a level that has some type of association with the gardens. Even the most highest level of Gan Eden, Ad lahanar sheyoytze me'Eden v'hishkas hagan, until the level of the river that leaves Eden and irrigates the garden, v'afilu ba'ofen sha'mayon nira b'haganim, even in such a manner that the wellspring is visible in the gardens. It's not the way the wellspring is in its own location, meaning that it is something that's, even though it's something that is high, but it's still a descent for the wellspring. True, it's a descent of something that's comparable to it. It's going to Gan Eden. It's even going Gan Eden, the highest level of Gan Eden, but it's still a descent. It's not the wellspring as it is in its own place. When the wellspring feeds into the gardens, it's not like a wellspring that has the ultimate level of being the living waters. Because a wellspring that such a wellspring that has living waters, it can purify even the most severest impurity. That's what's called the grandfather of Tumah, the father of the fathers of Tumah, meaning a dead body is called Avi Avois HaTumah. Cleansing even the most severe Tumah is a necessity for the true and complete redemption. Then will be fulfilled the promise. It's the spirit of Tumah I will remove from the earth. Our general actions and service in this idea is in two general matters. There is the ministers, the officers that are digging it, and also those that were the giving ones of the nation. The idea behind this is when we talk about digging, that goes to the depth. And this digging comes about specifically through ministers. In other words, someone that's in a leadership position, someone that's running something else. What is their idea in the service of a person to Hashem? It's the intellect that's in the brain that is considered a sar. Why is the intellect in the brain considered a sar? Because by a person that's worthy of the name Adam, he is following what an Adam is supposed to be, as it says in the pasuk. It's supposed to say Atem Krim Adam, not Itam. Atem Krim Adam. You are called Adam. I'll say Adam Elyon because I liken to above. So obviously we need to be worthy of the name Adam. Top of the next page, Yidalud Harei Hamoyach Shalt Al Lev. Who is considered the governor? Who is considered the sar? Who is considered the ruler? That is the brain, because the brain is the ruler over the heart. That's why it's called an officer, a minister. That's what it means, that the Sarim dug up the Be'er. Through the digging of the ministers, that's how the well becomes revealed. Because the idea of meditation, because that's what we're talking about, the brain being responsible for bringing out the well and the water, like it says, because I see your heavens, the actions of your fingers were addressing us to Hashem. The moon and the stars that you set up. What does this mean? He meditates and contemplates on the world. He sees in the world the power of the doer in the thing that's made. This means to say, even when he sees the world the way it's already a made thing, so he's looking at a created thing. He sees behind the externals, and he notices and he recognizes I'm looking at the heavens, but I see that they're your fingers. I see that they're the power of the doer. Until through his contemplation and meditation, he can see the power from which the power of making came about. So he says, what does that mean? Because the power that's actually embedded in the world is like we were learning about Shaykh V'Amurnas, Tasarim Amaris. So by his meditation, by his bonus, he doesn't just see the power that came into the world, the Tasarim Amaris, but he also traces it back to an even earlier level. He looks even at the source where the Tasarim Amaris came from. So he says in the brackets, line 9, it's like all the specific levels, darga, level upon level, that were enumerated in Tanya, concerning the drawing down of speech. In other words, that, like he's going to say right after the brackets, how did speech evolve? Came from the thought, came from the emotions, came from the intellect. So he's tracing it back. Just like he knows by himself that his speech is not where everything started from, but his speech had previous sources. So from this, he comes to the conclusion, understands the same thing by Hashem's speech. Hashem's speech, in the 10 utterances of which he created the world. So he sees not just the koyach hapoel benifol, he sees the koyach behind the koyach hapoel benifol. And just like by a human being, that the speech comes from the love that's in the heart, from the power of his chachma and his intellect, etc. Since his contemplation affects by him the removal of the concealment and covering of the physicality of the world, so then this is similar to the literal idea of digging, to remove the earth, to remove the mud that covers on the water, that passes through the veins, passes through the different channels that are underground. That is what his abundance does to the waters that are hidden within the neshama. And then, just like when you physically remove the dirt and the mud, through that the waters are revealed, and they go outward. It purifies him as someone that was purified from the worst type of tumah, the grandfather of tumah, meaning the tumas mes, the idea of a corpse. So now the Rebbe adds, we can add to this, line 21, the idea of the meditation, is included also that he contemplates, as neshama is mamish, a part of above, that he's a level of the wellspring of the gardens, and he's even higher than that. That itself, that he thinks into the fact that he is a level of Mayan, he is a level of a wellspring that gave and irrigated Gan Eden, and even higher than that. So that itself gives him the capability that while he's down here in the ground, in the level of the well should be able to rise up. We spoke about earlier in Ois Gimel that before the Ali Be'er, there is an Enula, even though the order of the pasuk is opposite. It says, rise up the well, and then it says Enula. But we said one of the ways of learning Enula, respond to it, proclaim to it, is talking about the Isurusa, the Le'ela that comes before the Isurusa Lasata. And that Isurusa Le'ela is the thinking about how the neshama is and realizing that neshama is a level of mayan to the ganim even before it comes down. Even after the contemplation, meditation with the intellect, which is the idea of the officers the minister is digging it up. That's the idea of the intellect. That's like an officer and minister over the midas. Since action is primary, this also has to come down into the emotions of the heart. And the heart splits up and goes to all sides, meaning that from the midos, it comes down in speech and in action, top of page Vav, which is the main thing that should impact action, turning away from bad and doing good. This word says afterwards they dug up Nedivei On the one hand, shows on a low level. The is in the word extinguish coals, meaning that's very dark, it's very low. Even though we're dealing with such a dark thing, we're talking about action, we're talking about the physical world. But over there, there's the Nediveyam. The Chazal explain that the Nediveyam, Shehema Avis, it's going in Avram Yitzchak Yankov, called the Nediveyam. That their ideas, the three lines of kindness, severity, beauty, Avram Yitzchak Yankov, those are the three midas. Shekaylim kolam midas kulam, as we know, the Chesed Gvura Tiferes includes in it all the midas in their entirety. So, what's the idea of Nedivei Yom? Through Nedivei Yom, it affects in the lowest levels. From the midas comes on afterwards into the level of action. Like it's brought down length. Until the Amarim and the Tzavach Tzedek in Eira Torah. To such a degree, days of Poilim Gamba Oilim, through this we affect also in the world. It should be in such a state, like it should be like the mitzvahs of your will. What does it mean, like the mitzvahs of your will? This means to say, even the way the world is in the category of being down here below, the comes about in it, the idea of a home down here below. All of this is affected through the actions of the mitzvahs, that the mitzvahs cause that should be the down here below, like it's Hashem's will. So up till now we explained Dali Beir, Nula, Chafaru Asadim, Karuna Diviyam. What's the end of the pasuk, which he said parenthetically earlier? He didn't focus on that. Now he's going to talk about the end of the pasuk. Line 14. Nasa Inyan. The Noisel Levonim comes about that it flows out of Levonim. The idea behind this is it was explained in a previous mimer in this to this mimer that Levonim is Lamed Beis Nun. Levonim can be divided into Lamed Beis and Nun. Lamed Beis is Sivus HaChachma. It's the 32 paths of Chachma. Nun Shari Bina and the 50 gates of Bina. Kefi Shem B'Yachad. It's Levonim. It's one word, meaning it's joining both together. That you have the Lamed Beis and Sivus and the Nun Shari Bina together. V'oidzos, not only do you have the level of Chachma and Bina together in its fullest way, but Shenoizlim, that it says it pours, it flows, u'maloshin mazel, is from the expression mazel. That mazel is higher than the level of intellect. So Levonin is the perfect intellect, but Noizlim is even higher than that. Malachas kama, how much more so Lamailam is Eir, Anpin v'nukve, even if it's higher than the intellect, for sure it's higher than the Midas, and higher than Malchus. That's the level, top of page Zayin, Bechinas Mazolo, the level of Mazolo. Bechinas HaMazel she'ein l'mayla imanu, until the level of Mazel, that there's no level that's higher than it. We'll stop over here.